Good midday to you. This is the midday moment for June the 18th, 2026 here on Following Him, the Disciple Life. Elon Trillionaire. Elon Musk is now considered the world's first trillionaire from one way of looking at it. And I'll explain more what I mean by that here in a second. But we're hearing much about his net worth now being a trillion, or I guess probably a little bit more than that, and many thoughts from both sides, right and left and such, on this. And you'll probably also find differing thoughts within the right and the left, but there seems to be one general view on the right, one general view on the left. Now, I did say from one way of looking at it, because when you adjust for inflation, he's not the world's first trillionaire. You do have other people in the past that when their income is adjusted for inflation, were worth in the hundreds of billions. Mansa Musa, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, West African king. I've seen some estimates on his net worth being around 400 billion when adjusted for inflation. John D. Rockefeller, I think, was in the 600 billions. In fact, he actually had like his income, his net worth was a larger portion of the U.S. economy. I hope I have this right, but from what I understand, was a larger portion of the U.S. economy than what Elon Musk would have been, like at the time, during his lifetime. But when you look at some figures like Augustus Caesar, or Caesar Augustus, I hear it said both ways, like 4.6 to 7.5 trillion is, those are some, that's like the estimate range I've seen on his net worth. Charlemagne, now, you know, he may have been there. His wealth is a little bit more incalculable, and some of these it is a little bit harder to figure out. Hope I said that right. Incalculable. Yeah, I think I said that right. I don't want to pull a Candace here, but you know, some of it's a little bit hard to figure out because of, you know, the economics a little bit different and such. But still, as far as like the amount of wealth that these people commanded, you know, at one point, Augustus Caesar pretty much owned Egypt, like Egypt, the country. So when you get a historical perspective on it, he's not necessarily the world's first trillionaire. In fact, he's not the world's first trillionaire. Genghis Khan, well, that would be more difficult because then you're having to figure out like the worth of land and such. But you know, Genghis Khan's empire, he some ways of looking at, as I understand, probably would have been worth in the trillions, definitely in the hundreds of billions. But I've seen some really big numbers connected to him. But all that being said, you know, what would I as a disciple say to Elon as far as being a trillionaire? Well, I would look at 1 Timothy 6. Now, some people say, oh, well, you would do like Jesus did, right? He told the rich young ruler to sell all your possessions, give it to the poor, and come follow Jesus. No, actually, now I would tell him to come follow Jesus. And if I found out that his wealth was an idol for him, was keeping him away from the kingdom of heaven, most definitely I would tell him to sell it all, get rid of it all. But we don't see Jesus doing that with every person. Zacchaeus didn't have to get rid of all his wealth. So that was a very specific thing for the rich young ruler. And, you know, in fact, when you see Jesus listing the commands, he doesn't mention the commands that are in regards to idolatry. And then he tells the rich young ruler to sell all your stuff, get rid of all your wealth. Consider that, because that was kind of how he was telling him about the commandment, you know, to not have any other gods before the Lord. So, yeah, Jesus was not, he did not condemn all wealth. You know, Solomon, he's another one in the past. I've seen some estimates on his net worth as being around 2 trillion when adjusted for inflation. We've, you know, figured in modern day dollars. And, you know, Jesus is Yahweh of the Bible. So he gave Solomon that net worth. If you recall the story, that his wealth and his wisdom came from God. So, and you know, a longer life too, although, you know, some of that we got to consider he didn't stay faithful. So maybe he would have even had a longer life than he did. But yeah, Solomon, $2 trillion net worth. Jesus as Yahweh would have blessed him with that sort of wealth. But what I would tell Elon, here's what I would tell Elon. Uh, I would tell him, as Paul told Timothy, to command those who are rich in this present age in 1 Timothy 6:17. I would tell him not to be haughty, not to trust in uncertain riches, but in the living God who gives us richly all things to enjoy. I would tell him to do good, to be rich in good works, ready to give, willing to share, storing up for himself a good foundation for the time to come, that he may lay hold on eternal life. I would, I would make sure he was a Christian, make sure that he had put on Christ in baptism, become a follower of Christ, and then I would tell him the things that Paul told Timothy there in 1 Timothy 6:17 through 19. And I paraphrase that a little bit to have it more addressed to an individual. But there are instructions in the New Testament given to rich people, but it's not just like get rid of all your stuff. It makes you evil to be wealthy. Now, you can get wealth through evil means. Ill-gotten gains is a possibility, but all gain is not ill-gotten. Elon Musk has been very productive. SpaceX just has enabled space travel to be much cheaper than it used to be. Is doing some amazing things. Space being privatized is something that's been needed. Despite yes, abuses that we do see with private industry, but you're going to see abuses in all things. It's not just people that in the private sector that are corrupt, but people in the public sector that are not. No, you have corrupt people in the private sector and the public sector. Like all people have this sin problem thing going on, and people will abuse power. But he built companies that provided services, that he's provided so many jobs. With this IPO, like so many people now, not just him being a trillionaire now. And of course, that's not, he's not Scrooge McDuck with his big bank vault thing on the edge of town that he goes and like swims in his money. That is not how that works. A lot of people do have a very cartoonish, infantile understanding of what it means to be a trillionaire. That doesn't mean that he has no access to wealth and can't spend lavishly if he wants to. He can, and I don't know the details, but I'm sure he does to a degree. I'm sure he enjoys his wealth. Nothing wrong with that, so long as it's not enjoying it in a sinful way. But other people are millionaires as a result. So it's not just him becoming a trillionaire. Other people now many people are well off because of this. But these things, we need to get a biblical perspective. Yes, greed is wrong. Yes, it would be wrong to trust in the riches. But you know what else is wrong? Covetousness and envy. Right now, we see a lot of people committing these sins against Elon and ultimately against God. So if his wealth is not ill-gotten, from everything I can see, it is not. So what are my thoughts? More power to him. I hope and pray that he becomes a Christian. And I pray that he does much good with his wealth and that he continues doing things that are good for society. I know some of that with some of the things that he's been involved with. Time may tell whether or not it's good for society. But no, it's not intrinsically wrong for him to be incredibly wealthy. And he is incredibly wealthy, but that is not intrinsically wrong. As I said, Solomon is estimated by some to have been worth around $2 trillion. And that came from God. So it's not wrong. God does not tempt people to sin. God would not have given him that if that was wrong. You have a good rest of the day. Lord willing, hope to have Thursday Thoughts up here earlier than some of the